This podcast is part of the Garnet Media Group podcast network. Garnet Media Group is a partnership between the student-run media outlets at the University of South Carolina. Find out more about Garnet Media's podcast and other student work on garnetmedia.org. The ballot is nearly set for midterm elections in South Carolina.
South Carolina voters will have the chance to elect their longest-serving governor, as well as potentially influence the majority in the U.S. House.
I'm Will Kronsberg.
And I'm Grace Weismantel. You're listening to In the Loop with SGTV News 4.
A contentious slate of primary elections in the Palmetto State last week produced a high-profile battle to lead the state through 2026, as well as a dramatically split Democratic primary for a seat they once held for almost 40 years, but have lost by more than 20% in the last three elections.
And a new program proposed in Columbia could be the express lane to students staying out of debt.
Finally, June means famously hot pride in Colombia, and we have the details on how the Palmetto State is celebrating. Last Tuesday, June 16th, primary elections were held all across the state of South Carolina ahead of the November midterms.
In addition to a swath of state house seats, South Carolinians in both parties picked nominees for all 7 congressional districts, a Senate seat, and the governor's mansion.
6 out of the 7 sitting U.S. representatives from the Palmetto State were renominated, with just Republican Tom Rice of the 7th District ousted in his primary, while Republican Senator Tim Scott and Governor Henry McMaster were also confirmed by the GOP for November.
On the Democratic side, former Congressman Joe Cunningham is set to face McMaster in the governor's race, while a near 3-way tie in the primary will send state representatives Crystal Matthews and activist Catherine Fleming Bruce to a runoff next week.
News 4 reporter Zane Heinlein joins us now. How are you, Zane?
I'm doing great, just trying to stay cool in this Carolina heat.
Yeah, aren't we all? Now, the biggest story coming out of the South Carolina primaries is with this governor's race, especially with Henry McMaster renominated, and he could perhaps become South Carolina's longest-serving executive, approaching 10 years. What can you tell us about this race?
This race will no doubt prove to be challenging for Joe Cunningham. Governor Henry McMaster's 80% approval rating with Republican voters, coupled with an endorsement from President Trump, makes him a prime candidate for re-election. The Republican Party currently controls both houses in the state legislature, making McMaster's potential re-election essential for the party's platforms to be seen through. He also easily won the nomination, beating out Harrison Musselwhite, gaining over 80% of the votes when the race was called.
And then on the other side of that, you have Joe Cunningham. He's back after losing re-election to the House back in 2020. So what does a path to victory look like for Cunningham?
Well, the stakes are high for Democratic nominee Joe Cunningham, since South Carolina hasn't elected a Democratic governor in over 20 years. He is running up against Henry McMaster, who has been governor since 2017. However, Cunningham has proved that he has the ability to oust McMaster when he flipped South Carolina's first congressional district from Republican to Democrat back in 2018. Boosting his popularity, Vice President Kamala Harris, during a party fundraiser in Columbia, urged South Carolina voters to, quote, get Democrats up and down state ballots, end quote. As for a path to victory, it is essential that Cunningham interacts with young voters, since that proved to be helpful when he originally visited the USC campus last year.
Even with that in account, it's impossible to avoid thinking about all of these hotly contested issues that have entered daily conversation. Things like COVID the past 2 years, Roe v. Wade coming back into question, and the possibility of new gun legislation. So what do you think voters will have on their minds when they do enter the voting booth come November?
Going into this election, we are going to see topics such as healthcare expansion, gun rights, transgender students in sports, and abortion be heavily debated. Both McMaster and Cunningham stay true to their party's beliefs, making them essentially opposites of one another concerning these issues, which kind of leaves voters with not much wiggle room when it comes to differing beliefs.
Yeah, Zane, thank you so much for your time. This is going to be an election to watch for sure.
Thank you.
Elsewhere in the Palmetto State, an effort is being made to ease the process for new entrepreneurs.
The City of Columbia announced a series of initiatives meant to make it easier to start and maintain a business in the capital city.
SGTV's Caiden Dinkins has more on this proposal.
Well, if you own a business in Columbia or are planning to open one soon, this one's for you. Last week, the city announced 6 business-friendly initiatives that will make processes easier for the business community. Among the initiatives include on-site parking requirements, a new business license application, and revise processes for making renovations and remodeling to existing buildings easier and more affordable. The city says the initiatives will provide shortened waiting periods, user-friendly processes, and will create a more business-friendly environment for those conducting business within the city.
On the minds of many this spring was a leaked preliminary Supreme Court decision that would reverse the precedent of the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision and leave the legality of abortions up to state leaders.
While he has joined many South Carolina Republicans in a plan to ban abortions in most cases, Governor Henry McMaster has also expressed a desire to make contraceptive options more available for South Carolinians, saying, quote, "If South Carolina wants to be a more pro-life state, we must provide the means for people to avoid unwanted pregnancies," end quote.
McMaster announced a bill back in May to allow pharmacists to prescribe birth control pills available without a doctor's note, joining with 15 other states plus D.C. who have a similar law. SGTV News 4 reporter Riley Hackett has the story.
The Pharmacy Access Act, which will go into effect in December, will allow certified pharmacists to prescribe oral contraceptives to individuals over the age of 18. This means that SC residents won't have to go to the doctor or have a previous prescription to get birth control at pharmacies. Senator Tom Davis, a Republican from Beaufort, sponsored the bill. Davis says requiring women to see a doctor to get birth control can stop women from getting it. Under the new law, pharmacists are required to encourage patients to continue to visit their primary care provider and gynecologist. State regulatory boards will decide before the law goes into effect what training and requirements are necessary for pharmacists who wish to be certified. Although the majority of the law is about pharmacists prescribing birth control, the Pharmacy Access Act also dictates that birth control is covered by insurance plans for SC residents who use Medicaid. The goal of this bipartisan law is to prevent unwanted pregnancies and therefore lower the demand for abortion procedures.
Thank you, Riley.
SC Pride launched a month celebrating the LGBTQ+ community in style on June 4th in the Vista.
With headliner Willow Pill, season 14 winner of RuPaul's Drag Race, Outfest celebrated the local community with local talent, vendors, and businesses.
The Capitol Club hosted the after party for Outfest with Elena DeVore and Coco Dove, accompanied by this year's winners of Miss and Mr. Outfest Columbia 2022.
Joining us now is SGTV News 4 reporter Calista Pushman to discuss Pride Month here in Columbia. How are you, Calista?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been a great month, especially with June being Pride Month. And as you guys mentioned here in Columbia, the city celebrated with its annual event called Outfest on June 4th.
Yes, can you give us a glimpse into what Outfest looked like and how it spread to be such a centerpiece of Pride?
Of course. Now, events like this are so critical to hold because it creates a safe and upbeat space for those in the LGBTQIA+ community to celebrate together and recognize just how far the community has come. Now, along with drag, many people showed up and showed out in every color of the rainbow. Whether they came to celebrate their own sexuality or came as an ally, it was just a sea of joy and color. Food trucks, local vendors, and a stage pumping out pop music and drag performers fed into this positive energy that radiated across the city.
With Outfest here in Columbia being over, are there any other big Pride events happening in South Carolina to wrap up the month?
Well, a big highlight for state celebrations is actually coming up this weekend. On June 25th, Charleston is hosting its annual Pride Parade at 9 a.m. in downtown historic Charleston. You can also catch the city's festival at the Riverfront Park from noon to 8 p.m. As for the upstate, on that same day of June 25th, there is a Black Pride Unity March and Festival being held from 3 to 9 p.m. in Greenville, South Carolina.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the movement and celebrations have evolved, especially in recent times?
Yeah, Pride events like this are so important because it's an impactful way for those in this community to celebrate each other and be heard locally and nationally. The LGBTQIA+ community have historically been targeted by government and society in general. So while this community has made great strides to gain essential human rights, there is still so much more to fight for. A controversy here in Colombia happened back in May when Governor Henry McMaster signed a bill banning transgender women from participating in women's sports. So one of the simplest and most positive ways to fight bills that target the community like this is to have events like Outfest, where local government and beyond can see that this community is here to stay and deserves the same rights as those outside it.
Thank you for joining us, Calista.
Thank you for having me.
In animal news, the Non-Human Rights Project, a nonprofit animal rights organization, argued for the relocation of Happy the elephant from the Bronx Zoo.
The advocacy group argued that Happy's environment amounted to cruel confinement, and that Happy should be able to sue under the habeas corpus rights.
On Tuesday, June 14th, the New York State Court of Appeals disagreed, saying Happy should stay at the Bronx Zoo.
The court said that while Happy and elephants in general are among the most intelligent animals, human rights cannot be extended to non-human animals.
It's finally the first week of summer, even though it's been 95 degrees in Columbia for like the last 6 weeks. So the capital city is ablaze with events to have fun in the sun beginning this weekend, and it all starts with Columbia Veg Fest. Now, that'll be Sunday, June 26th, and it starts at 11 a.m. at Sagra Park in the Bull Street District. It'll be full of live music, there'll be a fun family zone, educational programs, vendors, food trucks, and tons of vegan food because, Grace, after all, this is a vegan festival, so maybe not exactly my speed.
Maybe not, but I still think it'd be very interesting to try. I've never had vegan food.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be interesting. Definitely healthy, I'd imagine. So, good stuff there. What else is going on?
Walmart Summer Market is happening on Sunday, June 26th from 1 p.m. to 6 at the Art Bar. It's a curated market showcasing artists from different alternative subcultures with over 30 vendors selling art, clothes, and more. That seems really interesting. I'm sure you can find whatever you would need there.
It does seem really interesting. I think it's got kind of this cool, like, you can tell based on the name Walmart, obviously a play on Walmart, but it's got like this cool southern flair, but it's also kind of eclectic and quirky, so definitely interesting. The last event we have for this weekend is Columbia's 7th Shrimp and Grits Fest. It'll be on Saturday, June 25th at Seawells, located at 1125 Rosewood Drive. Columbia restaurants will be competing to be named Columbia's best shrimp and grits by a panel of judges, and for those in attendance as regulars, there'll be a People's Choice division so you can vote on your favorite dish as well. I'm not a big seafood person, but this does sound really interesting to me because I'd love to have the chance to rate some Columbia restaurants.
Yeah, I'm sure that kind of food is definitely popular in Colombia, and there's definitely gonna be a lot of competition. Also, how lucky are those judges?
I mean, they are so lucky, and shrimp and grits is popular here. It's also really popular where I'm from, down in Charleston. Lots of fresh shrimp on the coast, so a definite big South Carolina dish. As for that summer heat, today's high is only 92, while the low is a crisp 73. You can expect partly cloudy skies into the weekend and chance showers on Tuesday and Wednesday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average increased by 195 points, the Nasdaq increased by 179 points, and the S&P 500 rose by 36 points. Keeping you in the loop, I'm Will Kronsberg.
And I'm Grace Weismantel. Join us next week to stay in the loop.